Good evening, everybody. My name is Dana Brunn. I'm from the Mountain Patriots Educational Ministries with my buddy Kent G, KJG, Charlie Markert. Tonight we have on one of our great candidates here for the state of Virginia that's running for governor, Mr. Dave LaRock. We're going to get into that, some questions and answers with him in a few seconds. But I wanted to take a couple minutes before we start to tell you a little bit about Mountain Patriots Educational Ministries. Our ministry started originally about 3 years ago as the Mountain Patriots, and it was literally a neighborhood get together where people could watch each other. We are a Christian based conservative cadre of citizens that really believe in life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And we work really not on a national level, but we work right here in a community level because we were told early on to make sure that we start off and work in our local community, which is part of the reason that we have Mr. Dave LaRock on with us tonight. Our group believes in life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We've met every Monday night for almost the last 3 years straight. We do not miss a Monday, and we are a ministry. So every week we work on spiritual, educational, the Constitution, our civil defense, making sure that people are prepared. Like last night, we covered Frederick County Emergency Management, having a nice meeting with them and some of the Board of Supervisors. We work on elections and events like we're putting on right now that's coming up in June it's called the Wake Up Winchester Health and Freedom Conference. And part of the reasons we decided to do this one this year or this way this summer is because most people go out and they vote for people, but they have no idea what a clerk of court is or the governor. What does the governor do? What does the sheriff do? What does the commissioner of the revenue do? What does your county attorney do? So we're going to be covering a lot of that. We've got the Liberty Man coming in. We have some great people. The Clouds are going to be here talking about national events along with Dr. Sheila Fury. And of course, Title IX and education, which is Ann Craftatus. And of course, we're going to cover election integrity with Rodney Wine. So if you've ever wondered what people actually do in your government, we're going to try to take the day and explain to you how. So it's kind of what we call a little civics 101 for the average neighbor around the corner. So tonight we want to make sure that we bring some great content. And tonight we brought on a very good candidate in our eyes here for the state of Virginia, Mr. Dave LaRock. And I'm going to turn it over to my co-partner over here, Charlie Markert, to kind of get us started. Thank you, Dave, for being here tonight.
Pleasure to be with you, Dana.
Yes. Thank you, Dave. We appreciate your time, your willingness to share all this stuff with us. Dave, you and I go back many years. We both belonged to the Loudoun County Republican Committee back in the George W. Bush days. And we've had contact now and then ever since. And I've always been impressed with your willingness to step into the public arena, your willingness to take your time and talent and treasure and put it out there to make this state better, even though you don't have to. You're highly respected, and I know you served several terms in the House of Delegates for Virginia, and all of that is truly a volunteer effort too. So we appreciate that. But now you're running for governor. What led you to run for this particular position?
Yeah, good starter question, Charlie. And if I may just backtrack ever so quickly to public service in general. As you mentioned, we've both been very engaged in kind of being watchdogs in our local communities. You writing a bold column for the local paper in Purcellville, which
Yep.
probably one of the most read pieces of that paper because it was titled Common Sense.
Yep. Just common sense.
Yeah, just sense. So I'm gonna just speculate that that's probably one of the things that inspired me to think that there is an appetite for common sense. My focus for being engaged as a public servant was I marked at the time that President Obama was first on the scene. I am still convinced that he was of questionable eligibility, and I understood that he made pretty clear indication that he was probably loyal to Islam before he would be to America, and that really concerned me. So I dug in and realized that our Constitution was a tremendous document that was written by men who were submitted, I think, to God and very knowledgeable of Scripture, which gave me the confidence to realize that the foundations were laid for us. But that didn't mean that the people who swore the oath to that Constitution were going to uphold it. Some were, many weren't. So seems like a little bit of a tangent, but I got involved in a big money issue for Loudoun County. They were contemplating entering into an agreement in perpetuity with the Washington metro system. That was they made the wrong decision. They entered into it and locked in the local folks to, Loudoun County to many decades worth of financial commitment without any real significant return. And so that, I think I developed a little bit of street cred there. That wasn't the purpose of it. I just basically realized that there was a lot of misinformation or non-information on the part of a lot of people in the community. Tried to sort of fill in that gap. That I think led over into political involvement. Started out as a precinct captain, which is kind of entry-level Republican involvement. And that really was a point in my life where the Lord had been good to us, my wife and I, through a business that we had run for better part of 3 or 4 decades over in Loudoun County, building homes and doing carpentry, contracting work, and realizing that, eventually realizing this, I'll kind of fast forward into challenging a 20-year incumbent who was wrong on, we said at the time, guns, life, and taxes. He was wrong on those 3 issues, which means he really wasn't much of a Republican at all. So I think because I tended to be a fixer, as many of us guys are, you see something wrong and you think you can fix it. Thought I'd take on that challenge with local government. Well, actually state government, representing, it was eventually elected to serve the House district of Western Loudoun, Clark, and Frederick counties. And served in that capacity for 10 years. Great honor. Learned a lot about how Virginia government works. Didn't like most of it. And fortunately, government moves slowly, especially if things are kind of balanced between bodies of the legislature, House, Senate, or executive. I went in with about a 2/3 majority in favor of Republicans in the House, and that changed after the 2016 election and the women's movement. Ralph Northam and I think Mark Herring were down there with their pink hats, parading around like foolish people. And that was the year we lost the majority in the House by a pretty significant margin. I think I was the last elected representative in Western in Loudoun County at all. And there's some okay years there and some not so good years. Kind of, again, fast forwarding to of why I am running for governor, Charlie. It was very much the same feeling earlier this year that I had when I looked into Joe May's background. Again, 20-year incumbent, and realized that even though Republicans swore by the guy, they weren't looking at his voting record, and that's just a lazy way to elect your representatives, by only looking at the R next to their name.
Right.
I started paying attention to the track record of our lieutenant governor, who's kind of the presumptive nominee and endorsed by the governor. And although I was an enthusiastic supporter of hers when she ran 3 years ago, I heard bold promises and promises to be engaged on important issues. I think the parents' rights movement over in Loudoun kind of propelled her into the a victory as with the governor, and then once in office, I had very little luck or very little success engaging her and the governor on these very important issues, and that includes issues related to human life. While I was part of my time as a delegate, the Roe v. Wade decision was reversed, and that was a great time. A lot of attention on life, a lot of enthusiasm, and I really just proposed that to her that she would engage with me on some very sensible efforts to defend human life, likewise the governor, and it was amazing to me how little appetite there was for that. So we elect people to who promise to champion our issues, and expect them to follow through on that. So the more I looked at the record of the presumptive nominee, I was amazed at how little depth there was. If you go to the website, you'll still see the same thing. It looks like a photo album of friendly faces and nothing in the way of issues or policies. So yeah, again, I'm just jumping around a little bit, but basically just didn't see a candidate of any depth, knowing how important it is to unify our Republican base and hold the governor's seat to a firewall at very least, perhaps work with the House if we can win back the House. But without either of those, then we'd be drift back into Democrat dominance as we did for 2 of the years that I was there. It's pretty bad. They don't tread lightly when they're undoing decades worth of good laws that have been passed for the people of Virginia. They just do them in huge swaths, and it really is not good for the people of the Commonwealth. So many of those are unconstitutional laws and just shouldn't ever be passed at all. But anyway, so I'd like to be the candidate that can step up and beat Abigail Spanberger. And so go ahead, Charlie.
What that's good. I appreciate that answer. You've answered a couple other questions along the way. And I just want to say how impressed and pleased I am when someone who doesn't need the job, doesn't need the whatever few perks there are, steps up and does it. Your life would be more comfortable and easier, I'm sure, if you didn't do this. And I thank you for doing this because I know I can't, and I encourage you along the way. So one of your hot buttons is obviously abortion. And we appreciate that. What are some other hot buttons that you are putting up front in your journey here?
Yeah. Well, again, if you go to our website, you'll see a prominence of the idea that we should be bringing the Doge way of government to Virginia. So Doge is government efficiency, I think, are the two key pieces of that acronym. And
excuse me one second, Dave.
Go ahead.
Since you brought up website, okay,
yeah.
If you can help us out here, because I know there's going to be a lot of people listening, what is the website that folks can go to, since you brought up the website, and I know you've got a lot on there. If you could let us know what that website is, that would really be helpful in your campaign.
Sure. Yeah. So it's my name, Dave LaRock.
Right.
FORVA.com. Dave LaRock for Virginia, VA. And so, yeah, thanks for asking about that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. So Doge is a new concept, although it's kind of laughable that it would be so needed. And yet it took a bold president like President Trump to appoint a team. The most prominent and a celebrity there is Elon Musk, and to actually doing what is, I mean, the idea of it's basically like doing audits on a large scale of federal spending, and it's just astounding the stuff that they're coming up with, the scope of fraud in Social Security and then U.S. aid, and you name all these places. The money's just we're just bleeding money. It's amazing that we can misspend so much money and still be sort of solvent. Although maybe that's an arguable statement there. I mean, when you're
Right.
$37 trillion in debt, I think you're teetering close to the point where you won't be able to afford the interest on the debt. And eventually the whole idea of fiat money is going to collapse. And I'm not sure, in what form that's going to take, but it's just, we're living in la la land if we think that day of reckoning isn't going to come. Virginia, I think, is probably not so rampant with the reckless spending, partly because we have provisions in our Constitution that require a balanced budget. And that's a good thing, but that doesn't mean that there aren't many programs that are very bloated, and the budget itself is very bloated. And so in these difficult times, financial times, high cost of living, and that's what I'm hearing from lots and lots of people, just get government off my back. And that feeds into so many different other problems. I won't launch into a full discussion of all of them, but gas went up, 20 or 30 cents today. That just picks the pocket of the people. And the ones I feel for the most, Dana, is, I'll admit, I'm going to be able to afford my next tank of gas and the one after that. But I met a guy today and he said, 30 years old and 7 children. Well, God bless that man for being hopefully a good dad to all those kids. But we ought to be making his life better and easier every time, every way we can. And Virginia spends tons of money. Here's what I looked up today, just to give you a specific. For instance, I saw an article, I think it was from the Daily Caller, that said 37 states are suing, what they call it, gender affirming surgery.
Gender affirming care against gender affirming care.
Surgery.
Yeah. And I had a hunch, sure enough, I go to UVA's website and there it is, top surgery, bottom surgery, gender mutilation, nothing other than that. And that's our tax dollars. A good portion of their budget comes from the taxpayers of Virginia. I pointed out to the governor a couple of years ago that late-term abortions are being done at UVA and VCU. Right. And I was amazed. That was the most interaction I've had with the governor's office ever when I was down there. But you know what the message they sent to me was? Please we don't want you to be talking about that. We don't want that issue to come forward, even after he had said he would do anything he can to defend human life. So I'm drifting off from back to abortion, but the idea is that money is being spent in ways that provide no value to working people. And in many ways, they're inculcating our children with things that are very much counter to our own beliefs and the patriotic way of thinking that children ought to be learning and cool. So it's working against us in a very, it's not just random, as you know. Evil is very.
Are there any specific agencies
pernicious.
Are there any specific agencies in the state that need to be doged?
Well, I would say probably one of the first ones to look at would be those that are dispensing service, compensating people for services like welfare. I know there's probably plenty of welfare fraud. And, I just want to footnote that with saying that anytime you make something like distribution of those monies and services that in a way that purges fraud, then potentially there's more available to reappropriate elsewhere, and also to keep those services fully funded, people that really need them.
As long as they're appropriate.
That's right. It's the people who are genuinely qualified for those services. A little bit drifting off I really got a bone to pick with this whole legislature interfering with the State Corporation Commission, who's supposed to be the watchdog of the public utilities, and yet they Dominion has given $52 million in the last 10 years to buy off the elected officials who should be making sure that the playing field stays level. Instead, they're spending millions of dollars a year and then getting returns in the billions of dollars a year in over earnings that are charged by or retained by Dominion. The legislature ties the hands of the State Corporation Commission, and Dominion Energy gets a huge return on its investment. I've called out Lieutenant Governor Winsome Sears for taking $176,000. Now, how can you say you're going to be objective and unbiased in favor of, or at least biased in favor of the people that elected you when you've taken payoffs in the tune of $176,000? So we need to change that so that money isn't handed over to the politicians, and that we could I think take a Doge type look at the electric rates, for example, what they've done and how they've corresponded with the increase in this pay-to-play scheme that goes on in Richmond. Energy is another one, Charlie. We've got bad energy policies, and they cost consumers a huge amount of money. So like dig in and find some of the government waste there. Go ahead.
Plenty, a target-rich environment for Doge in Virginia, right?
I think so. Yes, a little hard to start digging.
Yeah, and that's probably true everywhere.
But our budget has increased significantly.
Yeah,
and I haven't been calling for more government. Have you?
No. Kent, you had some issues you wanted to ask about?
Well, I don't know if there were issues, Charlie, but Dave, it's good seeing you again. I don't know if you remember.
Oh yeah,
I saw you a couple weeks ago at I call it the little lodge house that we meet in on Mondays, but it's good to see you again. I was sitting next to you, and I think I was telling you some of my stories, some of my frustrations over the many years as a young guy. But welcome back. And if you're like me, somebody asks me one question and I can answer 20 of them, and I kind of get right. I'm like, man, where are we at here? So I know I know how we started off, but going back to a grounded question. So what was your background before politics? You necessarily weren't driven into politics through your whole life. Something had to put you there. So what was your background before getting into politics?
Yeah, so father, husband, Christian, businessman, I think was the experience that really informed me and shaped my thinking. So as a general contractor, constantly hiring subcontractors, purchasing materials, dealing with salespeople, and a lot of that overlaps. People are always trying to sell you something in Richmond. They, lobbyists bring you their clients. Their clients give you one side of the story, and you should do due diligence to find out the other side of the story before you form an opinion and take a vote eventually. So certainly the business really, central to developing my way of thinking. But I will also say that just my faith in understanding that Scripture speaks to all things moral. Now, there's some bills we vote on down there that, like in cities, counties, and towns that are, it's hard to find a moral component to them. But so many bills, even if it is just voting on the assumption that less government is better, and because less government intrudes less on people's God-given rights, then that's a guide in itself. So actually being grounded in the faith that was the faith of our founding fathers who wrote our Constitution, which we swear an oath to uphold when we take office, certainly is part of the background that I think allowed me to shape a career and a track record that hopefully patriots like yourself would see as being a solid conservative voting record.
Anybody that's been in business for themselves and had to deal with hiring and firing and taxes and everything else has seen it. And then you finally get to this point where we are in life going, wait a second, we did all this stuff and what happened? How did we do all of this stuff? And we're here. So yes, I
And-
agree.
and
That
Rick-
was a great question, Kent.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks, Dave.
That's another one I'll add to your list, Dana. So it's taxes and then over regulations, senseless regulations that
Way.
only drive up the cost of everything. But go ahead.
Yep.
So,
What else you
Off,
got,
Ken?
Kent?
so we were wondering about election integrity. That's a big thing, and in my mind, it's two things go together for rescuing
huge.
this country, and that is election integrity and getting rid of indoctrination of children uh, beyond what their education should be. So, can you tell us a little bit about where we stand, where you stand on the issue of election integrity? Because we hear a lot about paper ballots. We hear a lot about the machines are a problem. We want the same day voting. The list is probably a dozen things that we would like to see. And can you tell us where you are and what you see on that?
Let me help Dave out real quick on that, Charlie, because he's probably heard this too. On the 25th of March, the White House put out a giant statement on the HHS being involved, the Department of Homeland Security, election integrity. There was so much that was put out there. And Dave, I really think that it gives you a nice platform to run on because you do have the DHS and everybody else that's behind you. There's a lot coming out right now about Nancy Pelosi and J6 and so forth. So I think that there's a lot of upheaval of information that's been buried from on not just the Democrat side, but on the Republican side, because a lot of these folks, like you were saying, a lot of these folks on both sides of the aisle are in this because there are people that are getting paid for certain things. But there is a lot of legislation that's coming out right now from the White House that I think will give the next governor a lot of help here. What's your take on that?
Yeah. So, Charlie, you mentioned election integrity and one other issue. And
Children in education,
They're being
indoctrination.
taught how to
so
vote.
you've brought up
We have
election
'em.
integrity, education, and school choice all in one question there.
Yeah,
So-
yeah.
And so so I'll just jump to hopefully kind of answer where I stand. I carried a bill, I guess it was in 23, and we called it our election reform omnibus bill. It basically packaged. I was amazed at how many things that we really need to do to change how elections are being conducted, but everything from paper ballots to elections day versus election season, chain of custody and
Right.
printing and handling of ballots, and we hit on basically all of those things. So very much with you on the idea that elections need to be based on the consent of the governed and not what is it? It's not the Democrats say it's not who, or maybe it was some famous dictator. It's not who.
It's who counts the votes.
It's not,
It's not
it's
who
not
votes,
conducts
it's who
the
counts the
election.
votes.
It's who counts the votes. And
That was
counts the vote?
that was a Stalin tactic, by the way.
Stalin, yeah.
Yep.
And these
And
guys
Biden.
figured it out right a long time ago that if you could cheat, and before the 2020 election, I had learned from our county clerk that he had sent out jury summonses and found out a lot of people were saying, I'm not a citizen. Well, they didn't know that he got his list from the registrar's office. So here's
Right.
people that are registered to vote. So I, put in a bill to basically make it clear that clerks had the authority and clearance to exchange information with the registrars, because they're pretty careful about what they do. They don't just send a memo over, hey, we got 200 cheaters on the roll. And lo and behold, the Democrats opposed it. I learned that the only thing consistent about the Democrats is they oppose anything that makes cheating more difficult. That is just absolutely consistent. And then they insult our constituents by assuming that things like voter ID is unreasonable because apparently they think that certain portions of the population can't read or don't know how to apply for an ID,
Right.
which is
That's
is
insulting.
kind of laughable. It is insulting. Should be
It's
insulting to
insulting.
anybody. So yeah, I'm all in on anything that makes the vote fair, true and fair. I think machines are at the top of the list, maintaining the voter rolls right at the top of the list, and then closing this up. So 45 days is absurd. Didn't make sense even during COVID, and I think by design it was meant to allow more cheating. Permanent absentee lists are another crazy notion that once you apply for an absentee ballot, that they're going to keep sending one to that address until somebody requests that it be canceled. These are just hopefully or hopelessly flawed approaches to elections. So I could go on and on, but hopefully it's clear that we're on the same page, and a lot of our laws in Virginia are good laws. They were written at a day and age when maintaining chain of custody with printed ballots or absentee ballots,
right,
or both of those was taken seriously. But I went around with the current commissioner of revenue, of elections, Susan Beals, asking her that if you have the capability of printing ballots in-house, which they do, then why don't you print all of the absentee ballots in-house and then put on a little bit of extra staff if you need to mail some of them out? And you know what it actually came down to is she said there's a limited amount of the specific type paper the ballot has to be printed on. Now that doesn't sound like a crock of what. I don't know. I think she believed it. Someone had convinced her of that. But if you don't have problem solvers on a level that can deal with that kind of a challenge, then get them out and bring somebody in who can. But anyway, good laws on the books, and we could be doing worse.
Well, I'll tell you, Dave, we do have an excellent election, and you know him. We have an excellent election integrity guy right here in Frederick County. He's fantastic. Actually, Charlie and I did a podcast with him the other day, and any way that we could help you, we're in, because you know that most of us at Mountain Patriots are poll watchers or officers of election. There's usually 20, 25 of us that are out there doing what we need to do. And I think you probably heard also, I think it was Harriet Hagman, that was a congresswoman who was talking about them stopping. How did she put it? We weren't in 2020. We weren't allowed to use poll watchers. Okay. In a lot of the different precincts across the United States, Republicans were not allowed to have poll watchers. And now you have something right now in Wisconsin with their Supreme Court that's going on, where they had the black curtain, where people can't go behind the black curtain to find out what votes they're doing. But we're more than willing to help the whole state do whatever we need to do to make sure that the ballots are correct.
Yeah. One little footnote I'll add to that is, so we got a good president, and we got a team of reformers in there, but elections, with the exception of federal elections, were intended and should be conducted at the local level, because we don't want some clowns like Joe Biden and his bunch of Marxist friends coming in and trying to take over our elections, and because that's where it could really get off the rails. So local election integrity is very, very important. Probably a good example of local government being the best kind of government, and so local election integrity.
Yeah. So the local elections leads me into getting people educated to vote and to not be indoctrinated while they're in school, and coming out of schools or going into school, particularly a college, a conservative, and coming out a liberal because they've been indoctrinated for 4 years. I've seen that happen in my own family. So it's not, it's something that goes all the way down to kindergarten and preschool, that are subject and are easily indoctrinated into a way of thinking that we don't want in this country, because they're going to just grow up and go vote. So even if there's no voting fraud, we're building an electorate that's going to vote wrong. So that speaks to getting indoctrination of Marxism, of wokeism, of all of that, the bad stuff out of school, maybe even putting God back in school. Um,
That's got to be a must.
yeah.
And the
So
Constitution.
what's your thoughts on that, Dave?
Well, again, you cover a lot of ground, Charlie, but yeah, you know, the upheaval lately, and it's good upheaval that says, it's wrong to invade women's locker rooms with biological men. Isn't it kind of
Absolutely.
isn't it kind of
Absolutely.
wild that it needs to get that far off the rails before people jump in and say enough is enough? Over in Loudoun County, girl was sexually
Right.
assaulted, and I mean severely assaulted, 3 times, and they kept putting the boy back in school. He was just he had mental problems. I mean, he had a mental disorder. I mean, I don't think thinking he was a girl was the worst of it. But the part of the problem is, I think the superintendents are more concerned about their resume than the safety of children. But if they make that mistake, they certainly ought to be invited to find a different line of work. They shouldn't be in charge of children. But yeah, Charlie, the indoctrination, my thinking goes back way before transgender to, as you've alluded to, prayer in schools, being able to learn about their creator. I mean, we take it for granted that kids are going to be taught that they originated from some mud puddle somewhere. Now, the more I'm around the birth of children and the an infinite complexity of the human body and how we not only can we reproduce, but we heal ourselves under the best conditions. And the notion that it prevails in academia, which is that all of that happened randomly. I mean, come on. I mean, it's it's like looking up in the sky and seeing all that order up there and thinking, well, it just kind of happens to stay in harmony, and all the that we see is just random chance, but or the product of some random occurrence. So, but yet all our kids go to school and they're taught that apes are our predecessors, and that just confuses them right from the beginning. I think diminishes their understanding that life is intrinsically valuable, and that we're created in the image of God and so on. So we're getting them wrong.
I don't have enough faith to be an atheist.
No, that's a good saying. That sums it up.
That's about right.
Human sexuality. If you pay enough attention, I'm sure you guys do, you realize that most of the significant sexual deviancy comes from situations where kids have been abused, or people were abused as a child, and so we're just cultivating. The leftists are cultivating this confusion and interrupting the normal sexual psychological development of people, so that you're just creating more and more of this deviancy that is just kind of then perpetuates itself. So civics, to understand our great country and its origins and what God-given rights are, understanding who they're created to be, and how to become, also should be big on the list, should be how to become productive citizens, and learning, reading, writing, and arithmetic. I mean, math and reading scores are plummeting. The only thing going up is the amount of money that is spent to allegedly teach the kids. And some teachers are doing a great job. A lot of very dedicated teachers out there. I think a lot of the trash more comes in at the administrative level, and where there a few woke extremists kind of take over, and other people are just there to kind of do their job and not make waves. But until parents step in and say, this, then we're not going to allow you to hand out pornography to kids in our libraries and their class materials and so on. But it has to get pretty bad, or it has gotten pretty bad. And but hey, we can be optimistic and be prayerful and do our best to turn it around, because we're not quitters here in America, are we?
No, I have a question about that because you brought up something. I happen to have met the gentleman whose daughter was sexually molested quite a few times. He actually got arrested and thrown out of the school board meeting, and then the kid did it to another young lady at another school, so they just shifted him from school to school. But on that note, we're talking about pornography. You're talking about um, what they're being taught in schools. One of the big things that we see here in Virginia, and a lot of people, I don't know whether they realize this, it's been brought to the attention over the last few years, especially with the border crisis, about trafficking. Okay. And I want your input on what you think about trafficking here in Virginia, because we are actually, based on where we're located in Virginia with the highway system and so forth, Virginia is, we have all the statistics for it. If you want them, we'll be more than happy to supply them for you. We have them through 2024. But the child trafficking numbers, we're number 4 in the country when it comes to child trafficking. And I'm not going to get into the Epstein files or Clinton and things like that, but a lot of that's going to come out little by little because I don't think the public is really ready for how bad it actually is. But if we don't fix the problem inside of our schools, okay, and bring these biblical principles back into the schools, we're in for some really satanic stuff. You brought it up earlier. It is very evil. So what are your thoughts on doing something as far as the child trafficking and human trafficking is here in our state?
Well, I'll start by saying, yeah, I agree. It is a huge problem,
It's huge.
and we really need to attack it. It in a general sense, I think it's like the drug problem. You can cut off the supply. You can shut it down one place, but it seems to pop up in another place. Partly because the bigger picture circumstances still exist. Kids are groomed into being confused about themselves, which makes them more prone to be in the places they shouldn't be and to become victims, to be scooped up and trafficked. Immigration policy is huge. I
Right.
personally believe I've heard very credible accounts of the federal government actually moving people around who are being trafficked. Now, there may be some foolish, ill-informed people that think they're doing some illegal immigrants, a favor. But when you're undocumented, how do you establish what your real name is, who your parents are, and who should have custody of a child? Well, you can't. The simple answer is you cannot. So having that kind of chaos exist and is promoted previously by our own government. I mean, the current president, obviously, with Tom Homan, are charged with undoing that chaos. But boy, they have got a big job on their hands. But aside from that, I think it's actually just helping people become informed. It still amazes me that a crime, such a horrible crime, is so prevalent in a seemingly civilized culture like our own. I mean, we're right in the Bible Belt and so on, but yet evil still thrives and flourishes behind the scenes. So, don't have an easy answer for you on that, Dana, but certainly it is a horrible crime, and it would do everything in my power to make it as impossible as we can for that to continue. I think cutting down and reducing gang activity is another obvious way of just they've turned that into a very profitable form of organized crime, and so fighting gang activity would certainly help with that as well. So it's cutting the supply of potential victims, hard imposing the laws aggressively and making sure that people are caught doing that, or well, as far as I'm concerned, capital punishment shouldn't be off the table for that.
I'm in total agreement with you.
Yeah,
I have a suggestion because there's a lot
Sure.
of us since Trump got into office. There is such a big grassroots movement. I mean, most of us you wouldn't be doing what you're doing now if the country was running great. But there's that feeling I've got to do something, which is why Kent feels like this and Charlie feels like this and all the Mountain Patriots feel like this. But being able to engage groups like ours and others that are across this, I'm just thinking Virginia, that are willing to go out, help out, stand up, teach, bring communities back together. That awareness piece could be a big thing. And there's another part that goes with this. A lot of people are scared to death to say anything about gangs and so forth because, and I guess, Kent can help me out with this. That would kind of take us into 2A, wouldn't it, Kent? Because if we can't protect ourselves, how can we protect our children? How do we protect ourselves against migrants? You want to take that piece, Kent?
Boy, that was a great segue. And yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, I was gonna just kind of piggyback on the last, especially on schools. I got a young child that's getting ready to start school this fall, and my wife and I have done our due diligence into looking into all sorts of resources, and homeschooling's still not off the table
Right.
for us, right? I have a vast skill set in engineering, instructing. My wife was a teacher as well, so that's something that we also consider. But um, we'll see how this first year goes, and then getting into the 2A stuff, which is my favorite because I had owned a business. I started a business in South Texas selling rifle parts, and my background was heavy weapons, and so I really enjoy creating things and building things and putting things together. Uh, I think Dana kind of knows that, and so does Charlie. My theory on all this stuff for the longest time is that this is a constitutional right that was placed in 1789 and eventually into
Mhm.
1791, and we still have this massive argument today on a Second Amendment issue. It's one of the most sensitive issues, and it's a very important issue that separated us from the rest of tyrannical governments throughout generations. The Japanese military during the Second World War was afraid to invade the United States. And it wasn't because to fight our army; they were afraid that behind every blade of grass was an American with a gun, and that was the staple throughout of America to have what we have. I mean, that's our backbone,
Peace
and
through strength.
uh, yep, through superior firepower. And it's tough that I have to ask for a permission slip from my own government to carry conceal. Some states don't have that. I think West Virginia, you can do constitutional carry. But 2A is a big thing. It's a big thing to me, and I think it's a big thing to everybody. The key is responsibility. You have to be responsible uh, to uphold your Constitution. I've taken the oath 4 times, and it's a big deal for me. And Dave, I think I know your thoughts on this, but I want to get your answer on some 2A stuff. So go ahead, sir. Take it away.
Yeah, any particular question or should I just dive in?
Just kind of
You can
dive
dive
in.
in anywhere you want.
Sure. Yeah, well, as you know, I'm running for governor, and I am, you know, envisioning ways to use the power of the executive in Virginia, anticipating that very likely we will, very possibly, we're going to be a Democrat-dominated Senate. We may take the House, but that if we don't, then we're back to the executive really having the only significant power in Virginia. And so I've contemplated, obviously I would say obviously I can guarantee you that I would, like Governor Youngkin, veto any new proposed limitation of our constitutional right. The second is protected by the Second Amendment. But that isn't enough for me. I really would like to, and I've started to explore this with I think one of the wisest constitutional scholars I know, to formulate and articulate what would be an executive order that would prohibit the enforcement of any unconstitutional gun laws, or by any entity that is does business with or connected with the state through financing. So anybody that no monies would be dispersed to any entity that violates people's Second Amendment rights. So like the recent deputization of the state police to help enforce immigration law, that would be in order to state police to not enforce any unconstitutional gun laws. And thankfully, we have the Bruin decision that recently made it very clear that most gun restrictions are illegal. Now, as with any constitutional right, arriving at that sweet spot where the public is protected from any legitimate threat that gun possession or ownership could pose by people who, the few that maybe by virtue of their behavior has demonstrated that they shouldn't be in possession. But that's very few people, and we shouldn't. Tendency, again, on the part of Democrats is to want to take any incident that involves a gun and use that as a basis to claim that law-abiding citizens should have their rights curtailed. Well, that's obviously the wrong way to go about something. You punish the people who shouldn't have guns. But anyway, back to the constitutionally justifiable limitations. There are a few. Violent felons, for example, and but as with any constitutional right, there should be a demonstrated bona fide threat. Any limitation should be the least restrictive, and that should address the bona fide threat that has been established as a basis. So pretty much most gun laws should be off the table in my thinking, and that the state government should not participate in enforcement of. And when I take an oath to uphold the Constitution, that doesn't mean I have to respect all these ridiculous gun laws that are on the books and have been basically effectively struck down by the Supreme Court. I don't think people should all have to go to court to uphold their Second Amendment rights. They're so clearly articulated in the Constitution that let the government explain how any particular infringement on that right is justifiable. And so does that help at all there, Ken?
Yeah. Just one more comment on that, Dave.
Yeah.
Couple things too. I don't know if I used to study criminal law, criminal justice. About, I'm going to say roughly about 30 years ago, there was a small county in Georgia, and I think it was called Kennesaw County. So don't hold that to me if I'm wrong. But the sheriff of that county required all homeowners to be armed due to, I think it was a lot of break-in and enterings or burglaries into homes. And dramatically, that crime went down like 98%. Once that law went into place, when they found out that everybody was armed, shockingly, the crime stopped. Same situation with Switzerland. Switzerland was never invaded during the Second World War by the Nazis because Hitler would know he would lose over 800,000 of his Wehrmacht. Why? Because Switzerland's a sovereign country that every homeowner in Switzerland is required to own an automatic rifle with a safe full of ammunition. Now, of course, they're a little bit different because they have to serve into the military until they're 65. But how many wars are Switzerland getting into? And last, I want to just say is that there's a great reference book that was presented to me by a good friend of mine who also retired from federal service. He lives out in Norman, Oklahoma, and it's called Jeffrey Snyder. The author's Jeffrey Snyder. It's called A Nation of Cowards, and this book came out in the 90s. And if you were an anti-gun person, I guarantee within the first 10 pages you would become a non-anti-gun person. It really gets into John Lott. John Lott was a famous criminologist on statistics. So I highly recommend checking out Jeffrey Snyder's A Nation of Cowards. Actually, it's a very boring book as far as the cover. It's just all blue. But this is something I would give out to people who are kind of on the fence about these things.
Good.
Yep.
Your example of the town defending itself reminds me, I think, of what is probably the most sensible answer to address the need for school safety, and that is to so my specific idea. There's certainly probably variations of it that might be better, but that there be a locked box in the schoolroom, and that most, if not all, of the teachers be required to understand how to access the contents of the box, which would be a loaded firearm, and be comfortable using that to protect, stand their ground, basically. And the people that commit these school shootings have obviously got some mental problems, but you notice that they're smart enough to always pick the places where there's little resistance, like theaters and schools. And if they know that they're not going to get more than their first couple shots off, if that, then hopefully they're just going to say, you know what, I'm going to go elsewhere. Better yet, I'm just commit a crime at all.
Right.
So
Right.
yeah, I mean, you protect banks. You've heard the saying, you protect a bank where your money is with a firearm. The governor walks around with, Ralph Northam, when he was saying he would, I put in a bill that said people should be allowed to carry firearms in church if the church allowed that. And he opposed that, yet he would walk around with armed security every place he went. So,
it's funny how that
tax
is.
dollars.
Yeah. It's funny how it's the power to thee, not to the rest of the people.
Right.
And I lived in South Texas, and one of the things that we had to do, and back then, you could carry concealed with a concealed carry handgun permit, but you couldn't carry open at the time. Now that law has changed. We had to go through the proper channels with the deputy sheriffs to get certified. We had to go shoot and all this stuff, and then they sign off on it. And the deputy sheriff said this, and I'll never forget it. He says, "We encourage people to come out here, qualify, get their license, and carry and be responsible Texans." Why? Because the average response time for a woman in distress, i.e., being raped, is about 72 minutes. That's insane. They wanted people to be responsible. Obviously, right? You're a U.S. citizen. You should be responsible and know your boundaries. And that stuck with my wife because she was kind of skittish around handguns, and now she's a big she really supports carrying this stuff. Yeah, and it's just something to kind of like it drives it home. And I think that's a big deal. I think that's that.
You have to realize that when you're in an emergency like that, um, police will be there in minutes to help you when seconds count.
Yeah,
sure. Carry you out.
Charlie, when you can always count on law enforcement to draw a chalk line around your body.
Right.
Well,
yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. I like that you use the word encourage, that they encourage people to come out and learn to shoot. Whenever we put shall in there, we got to be kind of careful about that, because even though it sounds like a really good idea, anytime that the government decides that they can instruct us to do something, then they're probably getting pretty close to violating some of the freedom that we hold dear. But sounds like a great idea.
Yeah, that reminds me of what Chris Plant always says about liberals. If a liberal sees something they like, they make it mandatory. If they see something they don't like, they make it illegal.
Yeah.
We don't want to get into that trap.
Just think, guys.
But we're in a time trap. So we have one last question that I'd ask you, Dave. What can you say to us that none of your other candidates that are your opponents can say that distinguishes you as the best candidate?
I do want to go back one step part, Charlie.
We're having too much fun here, Charlie.
We're having fun.
I know.
Because I know where Charlie's going with this, and part of it is the tax situation we're in. And as you know, the President Trump right now is working on the central bank, the Federal Reserve, going back to gold. There's a lot of things that are happening with our tax system. Okay, so what are some of the things that you see closing up that you might be able to do with the property tax? We got tariffs that are coming in. We
Our
know that things
tax.
are going to go up a little bit, okay, but we're going to be made in America. So we're literally, with the right people in charge, we're in a golden age, and there's enough of us right now that are willing to stand up and not step back down and go, okay, we've got the governor in here. Now he's going to fix it.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll be right along there with you. But what are your thoughts with the IRS, the Internal Revenue Service, the External Revenue Service, since we brought up Doge, okay, and fixing that problem? We're finding up, what is it, $1 billion a day? Okay, $1 billion a day. All right. But what are you thinking as far as, and I know what we're thinking, elimination of the property tax. If it's done right, we probably could eliminate the property tax. Maybe end up with a flat tax, get rid of some of the car tax, which is ridiculous. We know that you can work your whole life, you have a $200,000 home, $300,000 home. And all of a sudden, you can't pay your taxes because what the government's done to you, and that $300,000 home is gone
Yeah.
because you weren't able to pay your tax bill.
Yeah.
So, what are your thoughts on the taxes, the property taxes, and so forth that are here in Virginia?
Yeah. Well, I'll try to roll in an answer to Charlie's question. What's the difference with me and react to
That's
your.
why I put them together.
Yeah, thanks. Um, so I think there's three things that are going to win this election. And it isn't money. It is certainly hard work, but I'm just going to playfully say it's policy, policy, and policy.
Yeah.
President Trump, great address to Congress, over 70%
yes.
approval, because people heard policies, and I think they had seen him already in action in his first term, and then in the first however many days it was, 60 or so days when he gave that address, enough to believe that he was going to undo some of the really horrible things that we've been subjected to over many years, but especially the last 4 years under Mr. Autopen there. So, and taxes are right at the top of the list. And you touched on the car tax and the property tax. I shouldn't be penalized to have a car in my driveway that I've already paid taxes when I earned the money and the taxes when I bought it, and then taxes every year. Property taxes, they treat you like a tenant on your own property. They tell you don't really own it. You rent it from the government, and you'll be evicted if you don't pay your rent. And obviously that's just not right. But it's going to take good policies and efficient government to claw back that money, reallocate it to eliminate some of these abusive taxes. And that is what distinguishes me between myself and the two other candidates. I'll say their names. Amanda Chase is a solid conservative, but if you look at her campaign and her website, you see nothing proposed in the way of serious policy initiatives. Winsome Sears, who is in the government now and is the presumptive nominee, it looks like a photo album of me and my friends. Well, that's just not going to cut it. People want substance, and so I just feel emboldened by seeing the president conducting government the way it should be, or at least pulling us back to that place. And if there's anything that's going to unify enough people to vote for somebody other than Spamberger there, Gavin Newsom in a pantsuit, we call her, and she would do to Virginia what Newsom is doing to California, just drag us deeper into bad management and then apologize and so on. So it's policy, claw back some of that money, appropriate it to improving our education through things like school choice. Charlie, you were leading me there, and I didn't get that far. But people are realizing that there's a better way to do things, and so the one thing Trump has done that I think he gets the most credit for is to surround himself with the best and the brightest.
Yes.
And
yes.
I don't claim to be the best and the brightest, but I would do my very best to get people who would maybe move away from their careers in business or come up with some auditors, an auditing team that could really dig in and get some good things done, and show people, where we can improve in Virginia, to model our practices after the best practices that are coming out of Washington, D.C.
Excellent. Excellent.
That's my
Do you
story.
have
I'm
any?
sticking to it, you guys.
Do you have? Yeah, that's good. Do you have any closing thoughts?
Well, just go to our website. We're really close to this first milestone, which is submitting signatures, 10,000, as you know, a minimum. And it's kind of late to ask people to sign signatures, but or to sign our ballot petitions. But if anybody wants to go out and round up a few pages of signatures, we still have the PDF on our website, and we'll arrange to have them picked up and dropped off in Richmond Thursday, before close of business Thursday.
And what's
So,
that
website
website
again?
What's your website again, Dave?
Yeah, it's Dave LaRock, spelled out FOR, VA.com. Dave LaRock for Virginia VA. Yeah, thanks you guys for doing the good work you're doing and helping me get the word out as well.
Excellent.
Yeah,
Closing
thank you,
thought,
Dave.
Kent,
This helps us
Charlie?
understand it,
Yeah.
the circumstances a whole lot
Sure.
better.
Yeah, there's
Yes.
a battle going on. Government wants to take as much of it as much away from us as they can. But I, for one, am not willing to let that happen. I know you guys aren't either. So
No, we're not.
Let's stay on that battlefield.
Thanks for being in the arena, Dave.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you, Charlie. Thank you,
Well,
Dana.
I want to thank
Ken.
all of you. Dave, first off, I want to thank you for taking the time. Kent, as always, great questions. Charlie, you as well. But I want to throw out there, make sure you go to Dave for Virginia, FOR Virginia.com.
Yeah, Dave
Make
LaRock,
sure you,
Dana.
Dave
It's
LaRock for
for Virginia.
Virginia.com.
Yep.
Okay. There is a day left or two to make sure that we're way over the 10,000 signatures. We want to see some good competition here. We want the best people to be running our government. And with that said, I want to remind everybody that Mountain Patriots Educational Ministries wants to keep people up to date with everything that's going on. So we appreciate Mr. LaRock being with us tonight. Make sure you come out on June 28th at Millwood Fire Department for the wakeupwinchester.com Health and Freedom Conference. There's going to be a lot of great people there, people learning Civics 101 like we're doing tonight with Mr. LaRock, finding out exactly what your government officials do, what we can do as a community to help the community, and what our elected officials can actually do to help us. And we work in tandem. And if we do this together, we get a chance to take our country back. And I think we're going to be really good at it. I will say this, Dave, with a lot of the things that are going on, I don't think we are a blue state. I think we're a red state. And if things progress the way they are progressing with Doge and what Mr. Trump is doing, and JD Vance and his team of the most incredible cabinet that I've ever seen, I think a lot of people are going to wake up, and this state could turn very red when people actually realize how deep they are in their pockets. And I don't care whether somebody's a Republican, a Democrat, a liberal. I don't care what your background is. We're human beings, and we get a chance to live and breathe a life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness right here in the country, in our own country. And if we stand up and fight for it, we're all going to be better off. So when you get to the end of this video, folks, we want to make sure as Mountain Patriots Educational Ministries that you like what you see, that you share it out there, get Dave's message out there, and make sure you subscribe.
wakeupwinchester.com.
Pardon me, Charlie?
Wakeupwinchester.com.
Go to wakeupwinchester.com. Make sure you get a ticket for what's coming on. And we're actually going to feed you because we want people to actually see what's coming on. There's going to be some great raffles, some fantastic speakers. But I do again want to thank you, Kent. I want to thank you as always, Charlie. You're always fantastic. And Charlie's part of the Planning Commission, so he can tell you what's going on here. And Mr. LaRock, you have been fantastic as a delegate here in our little town of Frederick. And we wish you the best of luck. And we want to thank you for taking the time tonight.
My pleasure. Keep me in your prayers, people.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Good luck,
Have
Dave.
a great evening.
Yep. Thanks, guys. Take care.
You bet.
Okay.